Hi, my name is Amina Cooper, public art consultant and strategist, and I'm Forecast's first Change Lab research fellow focusing on racial justice and equity in public art. Forecast is a nonprofit that activates, inspires, and advocates for public art that advances justice, health, and human dignity. Forecast Change Lab aims to creatively disrupt status quo and advance justice in the field of public art. My research studies public art policies and how they may be improved to increase support and opportunities to Black public artists. I'm also the latest Public Art Now guest curator, a special collection of selected works included in each issue of Forecast's new digital publication, Forward. Forward features leading voices sharing public art at the moment. Each guest curated Public Art Now selection accompanying the quarterly publication includes current works that move public art forward. This latest issue of Forward, where you can see the collection I curated, is launching later this month. And included in this collection is the incredible and awesome April Banks. April Banks is an artist, educated as an architect. Her creative career has straddled conceptual art, social practice, and exhibition design. Her interdisciplinary practice sits between photography, installation, and collaborative experiments. April graduated with a Bachelor of Architecture from Hampton University in Virginia in 1996. She obtained a Master's of Science in Environmental Design from Art Center College of Design in Pasadena in 1999. And she is based in Los Angeles. April, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to ask you 5 quick questions. First, how would you describe your art for public and community space?
That's a good question. That's always a challenge. I would say that my process, so I feel like I should start with process, is always pretty research intensive and immersive. So I have a lot of conversations with people, a lot of listening, and that always kind of informs what I end up making. I would say my aesthetic style is minimal and referential. So I often reference the original object or item in my work, but either leave information out so that you ask questions, or in some way I'm referencing or talking about the gaps in history. I have worked at all kinds of scales, but my goal has always been to work at an architectural scale, and which is a perfect match, obviously, for public art. Yeah, I think that's how I would describe it in a very simple terms.
No, that was very eloquently said. Okay, next question. Why do you choose to work in public and community space?
Yeah, so, as you said in my bio, I'm educated as an architect. I have always worked in both the design and art world. So I'm already thinking about design in public spaces and private spaces. So my experience, I'll say, I've been shifting more into full-time art specifically because of my experience working as an exhibition designer for museums. So I understand the need for museums and recording history, but I became very disillusioned with the institution and how stories are being told, how history is being archived, how experiences are being shaped as you even move through the space. So not just the information, but the structure of the space. And then being one of the few Black designers in this field, I felt like I was contributing to my own erasure, the erasure of my own narrative. And so just becoming more and more frustrated. And so I'm no longer working in typical projects in exhibition design, although I still consult on projects that I feel are the right fit. But all of this has given me the experience, that's necessary to do a public art piece, which is, I think, probably one of the biggest barriers for so many people entering the field.
I mean, it just sounds like your background is perfect for the work that you're doing, but also the experience working in museums, because I think you're seeing up close the limitations that museums can have for artists and then the public trying to experience and live with art. Thank you for the answer. Okay, next question. What has been the most challenging aspect of working in the public realm, and what has been the most rewarding?
So, there's different kinds of public art projects. I think I've always been in the space of social justice, social practice, political commentary. So that is automatically comes with, often opposing ideas, sometimes conflicting ideas. So the biggest challenge is usually how to even approach the project in a way that that includes or listens to all the many voices. And then because you're making a piece that presumably is in a public space that every day people are going to have to interact with it. So what is your piece saying? And so, how do you approach that? Like, where do you begin? And so for my last project in Santa Monica for Belmar History and Art, it probably the bigger portion of the project was about community engagement. So I had to propose that process. I didn't propose a concept for the art. And so I spent a good amount of time, I can't even calculate the months now with COVID, leading up to it, working with community, a community that has been displaced and dispersed. So finding the descendants so that we could get firsthand stories, but also working with the people that do live there now, working with students, different generations, different interests, like how do you get people interested in history and information based on where they are. So that's where the collaborative process comes in, working with other artists who work in other mediums so that we can reach people where they are. And so that was probably the biggest challenge, like how to design that whole process. And then obviously there's the logistical sides, like literally as a new artist in the public art realm, I do understand design, but I've never worked as an individual artist. So it's like going through the permitting process and getting your team together, your legal team, your financial team. So those were some challenges that were not insurmountable, but they did feel intimidating at the very beginning. And there was a lot of like, but I felt very supported. And so I would just say, don't, if you're new to this, don't be turned off by that challenge.
April, was this one of your first projects?
This is my first permanent public art piece, and definitely at this scale. So I've done some other kind of temporary experimental pop-up pieces, but yes, at this scale, with this kind of the magnitude of the project itself, the erasure, all of that was pretty intense for the first project, but also I think has positioned me well for continuing in this work.
Well, congratulations. That is quite an accomplishment. Like, I did not realize that this was your first permanent public art installation, and that's incredible.
Yeah. And to have the budget that this project had for my first piece, I think is really has been, like I said, a little intimidating, but also great because when you're applying for public art projects, it's always, what is your portfolio? What was the budget for that project? How much is basically looking at your track record and your experience. And so to start off with a project of this scale, I think has set me up well. And then to the second part of your question, what do I find rewarding? I think it was just the pride that the elders from this displaced community. So, Belmar was a former Black community that was 2 blocks from the beach, and through the city's process of eminent domain for development, they took the land from this community. And this was the 1900s to 1950s. And the children or the grandchildren of these community members are alive now, and their sense of pride about, you know, their parents' histories being retold in a monumental way has been absolutely the most rewarding part of it.
Wonderful, wonderful. Congratulations again.
Thank you.
Is there a particular public artist or scholar, anyone that's inspired your work as a public artist?
Yeah, so my influences are kind of all over the place, from architecture to design to dance to scholars. So early on, I would say, even just out of architecture school, the early work of Diller and Skip Video, which is an architecture firm in New York, they were doing spaces that were about the experience. So they may have been temporary, but they were very much about how you experience the space. And it felt like the perfect blend of art and architecture that I was striving for, but didn't see a whole lot of examples for at that time. I would say Gordon Matta Clark, who was an artist in the 1970s, who was using buildings, abandoned buildings as his canvas and carving away at the space in them. And so again, kind of manipulating buildings at an architectural scale, but as a piece of art. I would say scholars, not to be purely self-promotional, but a book that just was published this year called Afro Nostalgia, Feeling Good in Contemporary Black Culture by Bahia Ahad Lagarde, reviews my work as well as several other artists who work specifically in the realm of nostalgia, history, reimagining Black history in particular, and the ways that we do it. So I felt like putting all of our work in context in a way that, you know, I never think about as an artist was really moving, and I think necessary for the conversations that are happening around public art right now. As far as dance, I would say the Alonzo King Ballet Dance Company in San Francisco. I love the way their director, who is a Black director, thinks about the body in a non-traditional way, but also the way they work with artists for their sets and creating their spaces. I've collaborated a lot with dancers, and so I'm always in that space and being inspired by movement and how you interact with space.
Well, thank you for sharing those references. And when your bio says interdisciplinary, like that's no joke. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, last question. What advice do you have for Black artists, either interested in public art or currently in this space and trying to find more opportunities?
Yeah, I think I mentioned earlier that kind of that intimidation factor, and also just the barrier of how do you start when you don't have the experience.
Right.
So I would say, if it's possible, join a team of someone else who's working on public art, just so that you get that first project in your portfolio.
Right.
I would say start local. It's hard to take it all in, like the team that you need to do the work, and so building your network locally is easier. You know, you have to find your insurance broker and your legal team and your fabrication team, and to do that locally, I think is an easier ask. I would also say reach out to other artists. Right. I have found artists to be very generous with information and process. You know, one may not reply, but don't be discouraged by that. Just just keep trying. And then there are cities who ask you to submit to be a part of their call list. You may not be actually applying for a particular piece of work, but to get your name on a roster, right, I think is a good first step as well.
Wonderful. Well, those are helpful tips. And I want to say thank you, April, so much for your time. Thank you for answering 5 questions with Forecast and myself. And we're just so encouraged by your work, and we'll look out for your new projects.
Thank you. Thanks for having this conversation and doing the work that you're doing.
Thank you.